So I've got Companies Act, and I leave a decent amount of space because it's the biggest. King. And we come into the scenario. The first point we've picked up here with regards to the Companies Act is partner rotation. So I'm going to say the partner has been on the audit for 6 consecutive years. Per the Companies Act, partner rotation is required after 5 consecutive years, therefore non-compliance with the Companies Act. Now that I'm doing non-compliance, I want to quickly put this as a point for non-compliance for all my other acts and regulations. So I'll go down to King and I'll say, per King, company must comply with laws and regulations. And I'll say, yeah, company is not complying with the Companies Act, and my point here is partner rotation. But now if you remember, there were lots of different areas where they weren't, so I'm going to leave a little bit of space to add those, and then I'm just going to say therefore non-compliance with King. I've now addressed all of those. Then I come down and I've got some non-compliance with Kings here. So I'm going to put them all down. Non-compliance in that the chairman on the board is part of the audit committee. Non-compliance in that the majority of the risk committee are not non-executive. And non-compliance with the remuneration and nomination because they have executive directors and should only have non-executives. So I'm going to start with my chair, per King. Chair of the board should not be a member of the audit committee, and I'll say the chairman on the board is a member of the audit committee because there are only 3 independent non-exec directors on the board, and all are members of the audit committee. I'll address the 2 nomination and remuneration together. Per King, nomination and remuneration committees should comprise only of non-exec both have executive directors, therefore non-compliance. And then per King, the risk committee should comprise majority non-exec. They've got 2 execs to 2 non-exec, therefore non-compliance. It's not a majority. And all of those have been addressed. Okay, now I get to my decision. And the biggest decision being the 1 decision financial assistance for the purchase of shares. And my concern here is they haven't performed the test, but when we do perform the test, we can see that they are not liquid and solvent, which means they haven't adhered to those terms. So let's go into the Companies Act to quickly see those. So Section 44, financial assistance for the subscription of securities. And it says, except to the extent that the Memorandum of Incorporation provides, the board can authorize financial assistance, and it shows you as a provision of security that would be considered that. However, what are the criteria? They may not authorize it unless it's pursuant to an employee share scheme or there's a special resolution. So that was met. And they are satisfied that immediately after they would meet the solvency and liquidity, which is incorrect. They haven't even considered or discussed the terms being fair, so I would put that down. They haven't considered the MOR in discussions of that, so that's a bit of a concern. It is void, so I would put this down if it is not consistent with this section. And then any directors that were present and failed to vote against could be held liable. So all of those are the points that I want to actually make with regards to this. Because this is to discuss the legality, and this was not done legally. So I'm going to put the information from the question. The board authorized financial assistance for the purchase of shares to runners okay, then I say, per the Companies Act, financial assistance for the purchase of shares can only be authorized if there was a special resolution passed within the 2 years of this decision. The board are satisfied that they will be liquid and solvent after. The board are satisfied that the terms are fair and reasonable, and have complied with the MOR, conditions in the MOR. Now I need to say, the financial assistance is void because the board did not satisfy itself that there would be liquid and solvent after, because before this transaction they are not liquid. And I can even put in the figures here. There was no discussion on whether the terms are fair or compliance with the MOR. And therefore, this is void. I will then say, directors present who voted in favor can be held liable. Now, guys, Although I only picked this up later in the scenario, I've already discussed here that they are not liquid. So now I'm going to discuss the reckless trading. So I'm going to say, per the financials, at 29 February 2019, current liabilities exceed current assets. Therefore, they are not liquid. Therefore, they are recklessly trading. Let me show you that in section 22. And I never actually stated the theory, so it's important that you do that, but it says you should not conduct business if you are unable to pay its debts as they fall due in the normal course of business. Okay, so I now can explain that that is reckless trading. Once I've proved reckless trading, I can now go and discuss directors' conduct. Let's look at section 76. And it says a director must not knowingly cause harm to the company or to a subsidiary. They must act in good faith, in the best interest of the company with a degree of care and skill. So once again, I can now go and discuss that they're not acting in the best interest by entering into transactions when they are not liquid and able to pay for those transactions. So, non-compliance with the Companies Act. Per the Companies Act, directors should act in good faith, in the best interest of the company by recklessly trading and not complying with the requirements of the Companies Act. Directors are not acting in the best interest of the company. And now I can go and add all of these non-compliances to where I've discussed non-compliance. So here we've said partner rotation in King. I can now go and add financial assistance for purchase of shares. Can add reckless trading. Can add director's conduct. So all of this has now been addressed, and I've now gone and put all the non-compliance with all of those into the different codes, regulations, and so on. Then, appointment of the company secretary, non-compliance with the Companies Act, because they have 60 days. Let's go look at that section. Section 86 of the Companies Act says a public, which we are dealing with, must have a company secretary. So that's how I can prove that they must have it. And within 60 days, if a vacancy arises, the directors must fill this position. I don't have any more space under my Companies Act. This could happen to you in a test or exam. So what do? After where I'm finished or where my space comes up again, I'll put your Companies Act continued. So they know I'm going back to that. And I state, Com is a public company, therefore requires company secretary. Company secretary resigned in February and will be appointed, or the next, in June, therefore more than 60 days vacancy. Per Companies Act, company secretary shall be appointed within 60 days of a vacancy arising, therefore non-compliance. So once again, everywhere where I've got non-compliance, I can now go and add this as a subsection. And I can cross that off. I have already addressed the reckless trading, and so I'm done. Let's have a look at the solution. Okay, so in terms of the solution Companies Act, guys, first thing, the rotation. So that was a nice easy one, theory followed by application, done. Something we didn't discuss was then to expand that on the audit committee. It's a requirement that they ensure that the auditor is independent. Fact that the auditor isn't means the audit committee is not doing their job. So that's something you can always link back to in the Companies Act. Then the section 44, securing of the financial assistance. We first discussed the requirements from the Companies Act and then explain how they have not met those requirements. Okay, from that we were able to then prove the reckless trading because they're unable to pay their debts as they fall due and go into directors' conduct. They've also gone into the liability of directors. Okay, section 77, we can do that because they're recklessly trading. In terms of the Companies Act, what are the requirements within 60 days? It's definitely more than 60 days non-compliance. King, the same thing as Companies Act. As soon as we're discussing auditors not being independent, we can link it back to the audit committee because they've got a duty to ensure that is happening. Other than that, the chairman of the board not being on the audit committee, then my concerns with the composition of the two committees, or three committees, is addressed there. Solvency and liquidity, they have a responsibility to be alert to the solvency and liquidity in terms of King. They're not liquid, so they're obviously not doing that. And then, guys, like I said in the with regards to the Companies Act, as soon as I can see directors' conduct is a concern, I can address that from a Companies Act perspective, but I can then also bring that into a King perspective, okay? Because King also has requirements on directors' conduct. Company secretary is also dealt with in King. So as you can see, guys, there's so many available marks for what it's out of that we might have got 10 without going into a few of the points. Compliance with laws. Questions you guys can expect, just have a look there. Demonstrate your understanding of the principles and recommendations of King. So basically, you need to apply the theory here. Which means you are going to get a mark for 1, discussing the theory straight from the King Code, and then 2, applying it to the scenario. Make appropriate recommendations regarding practical aspects. So once again, being able to identify the area in the King Code and then applying based on what the King Code says. Comments on compliance or non-compliance. Once again, what is the theory of what they should be doing, applying what they have done, and then being able to say non-compliance or compliance. Okay, so I can see the board comprises of majority executive directors, so I'm going to say the theory is King requires that the board comply of majority non-exec, majority of those being independent. This board has majority executive, therefore non-compliance. Okay, so when it comes to this, you want to be putting down the theory to prove compliance or non-compliance with the code. So you have to show the code in order to prove that. Very similar to what we discussed with our Companies Act. Put the theory down, there is going to be a mark for it, and then apply the theory.